Content note. The romance of a rogue contains unhealthy relationship dynamics and the romanticization of stalking. Listen at your own risk.
Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I'm excited to read to you from The Romance of a Rogue by Ruby M. Ayres. Chapter 7. John Christopher's somber eyes were quick to notice the change of expression in Charmian's face that night when Bruce Lowry did not appear, but she said nothing, and in answer to his inquiry as to her health, answered that she was quite well. There was a poor attendance in the room, and things seemed to flag. Before 12 o'clock, all the dancers had gone, and Christopher laid down his violin with a sigh. "We may, with luck, get some beauty sleep tonight," he said to Charmian. She nodded absently and packed her music away. "Where's your friend this evening?" she asked with elaborate carelessness. "He has gone out to dinner with some friends." She laughed. Dinner? Then she caught herself up swiftly, but not before Christopher had guessed her thoughts. She was thinking how unfair life was, how unequally things were divided. "Has he come into a fortune?" she asked bitterly. "Or been adopted by a millionaire?" "I believe he has come into a little money," Christopher answered. She shut her violin case with a hard snap. "I suppose you guessed that I knew him before?" she hazarded. "Yes." To his amazement, tears brimmed to her eyes. "Why doesn't someone invent a drug or a machine to kill memory?" she said with sudden passion. "It's not fair that we should have to go on remembering the things we would give our soul to forget." "A sorrow's crown of sorrow is remembering happier things," John Christopher quoted softly. He looked at her with his somber eyes. "Will you let me take you somewhere to supper tonight?" he urged after a moment. "It's for my sake I am asking, not yours. It happens to be my birthday, and I should like to have my birthday supper with someone." She smiled and brushed the tears from her eyes. "Do you still keep birthdays?" she asked. "I've forgotten all mine long ago." "But you will not refuse to come to my birthday party?" he asked. She hesitated. Then she gave in. "I will come if you give me your word of honor that it really is your birthday." Christopher lied gallantly. "My word of honor," he said in his best melodramatic manner. It was well worth the lie, he told himself, when later they sat at a marble-top table with steaming cups of coffee before them and poached eggs and ham on order. This was a different Charmian to the woman he had known. She had taken off her hat and pushed her hair back carelessly, making herself look younger. Beauty had climbed up onto a chair beside her, and she put an arm around him. "I had a dog once," she said impulsively. "He was only a mongrel. I rescued him from some boys who were teasing him." She stroked Beauty's soft nose. "I called him Patch," she added retrospectively. "I remember we christened him in the garden with a bottle of ginger wine." She laughed. And then checked herself hurriedly, her face falling once more into hard lines as she drew her arm away from Beauty. "What's the good of remembering?" she asked heartily. "If it were not for my memories, I should be a lonely man," John Christopher said thoughtfully. "Memories are the most wonderful company in the world. You have only to shut your eyes and look back into the past. It's quite easy when you've tried a few times. I can do it without any trouble now. I can see gardens and rooms and houses that I knew when I was a boy. I can see faces and hear voices." She was leaning forward, looking at him eagerly, a little splash of color in her face. Yes, she said eagerly when he paused. "And you can hear music, can't you? Tunes you used to like." She broke off, and he knew that she was thinking of Bruce Lowry and the Destiny Waltz, and then they both sat silent till the ham and eggs were brought. "Many happy returns of the day," Charmian said. "I suppose I must not ask how old you are." John Christopher smiled. "While I keep my memories, I keep eternal youth," he answered. They were both hungry, and until the meal was finished, they spoke but little. Then Christopher ordered more coffee, and leaned back in his chair with a contented sigh. "I feel able to conquer kingdoms now," he said. "Do you?" Charmian's sad eyes rested on his thin face. "You know, there's something about you I like," she said suddenly. He inclined his head gallantly. The reciprocity of the sentiment is unbounded, fair lady." She laughed, then grew grave once more to ask, "John, have you ever been in love?" Christopher was balancing a lump of sugar on Beauty's soft nose, and he finished the task gravely before he answered, "In love? A dozen times. But I have loved only once." Charmian leaned her chin in the cup of her hand. "Tell me about her." He shook his head, jerking the long lock of hair down across his forehead. "There is so little to tell. We were engaged. We should have been married, but someone else came along whom she preferred to me, and so she married him." "And you did not care?" He smiled at the question. "I cared. Of course I cared. It was as if someone had said to me, 'You shall never see the sunshine again.'" The sensitive color rose to her face. "Yes, I know what that feels like," she almost whispered. "But she was happy. Happier with him than she would have been with me, I doubt not," he went on in his quaint, theatrical manner, "and I was content that it should be so. Do you ever see her now?" "Every night in my dreams," John Christopher answered softly. "She died 15 years ago." Charmian uttered a little sound of pain. "Oh, I'm sorry, I did not know." "How could you know?" he asked her. "And you need not be sorry. Someday everything will come right, and the great love I had for her will be rewarded." "You mean in heaven?" she asked. "That will be my heaven," he answered, "to be with her." There was a long silence, which Charmian broke. "And supposing she had lived and done something dreadful, something you could never forgive?" Christopher shook his head. "That would not be possible," he said quietly. "When you love, there is no question of forgiveness. It would have been the same to me, whatever she had done." Charmian drew back. "If she had gone to prison?" she asked, at last, hoarsely. Christopher's voice was very gentle when he answered. "Whatever she had done, she would be the same woman, and I should have remembered it." "In such a case, don't you think she would have suffered more than I?" He waited for a reply, but it was some seconds before it came. "I never thought of it like that." "To me," said John Christopher, "there is no other way in which one can think of it." He finished his coffee, carefully scraping the sugar from the bottom of the cup with a spoon. "If we stay longer, we shall miss our beauty sleep after all," he said. Charmian put on her hat. "Perhaps you have a more attractive home to go to than I have," she said with a sigh. But she would not let him accompany her to her door, and they said goodbye in the street outside. But Charmian stood for some seconds under a lamp, watching the old musician trudge away into the darkness, with a spaniel close at his heels. Bruce Lowry was fast asleep by the fire when Christopher opened the door of his room. His head was sunk on his breast, and his arms hung limply over the sides of the chair. Beauty went to him and licked his wrist, but he did not stir till the clatter of the teacups roused him, and then he sat up, laughing apologetically and rubbing his eyes. "Have I been asleep? It must have been the wine I had for dinner. I'm not used to such luxuries." "You've had an enjoyable evening?" Christopher asked. "They were all very kind," Bruce answered evasively. "And how have you got on tonight?" Christopher smiled. "Fortune has been kind to me. I've had 2 successes." "What do you mean?" That first of all I persuaded the management to adopt your little scheme, and that next week Miss Lee's salary will be increased by 20 shillings. Bruce started up. "You mean that? You really mean it?" "On the word of one gentleman to another." There was a little silence. "And the other success?" Bruce asked. "I took Miss Lee out to supper. I was guilty of a little harmless deception. I told her it was my birthday." "And she went with you?" Christopher nodded gravely. "We dined tete-a-tete on ham and eggs and coffee," he said. "And afterwards, did you see her home?" "No." Christopher rose and gave Beauty her supper. Then he made the tea and poured it out. Bruce sat staring into the fire, his brows knitted in a line of pain. He thought of Stella and her gray silk frock, of her home and her happy comfort. Then he thought of Charmian. Suddenly he spoke. "Tomorrow night I shall follow her home and find out where she lives." And that is the end of Chapter 7 of The Romance of a Rogue by Ruby M. Ayres. Thank you for listening to it with me, and I hope you return soon for the next one. Have a great day. Bye!